So, Jodie, you're a passionate steward of water. Why don't you tell us what led you here?
Oh, thanks for having me on first, Ebony. Realm of water I came into in 2007 when I had a friend who had struggled with weight challenges, and he was a big boy. At his heaviest, he was 660 pounds, which is about 300 kilos. And I'd sent a friend from down under up to live with him and got him down to 350 pounds to train him and feed him and all that sort of stuff. And he'd got down to 350 pounds, and he'd blown back up to about 500 pounds. And I was living in the States at the time. He was based in Los Angeles. And I was coming back through Los Angeles on my way back to New York. And he said, I rang him, let him know I was coming through town. And he said, oh, I'll pick you up at the airport. Come stay at my place. Anyway, I turned up there and he was like 280 pounds. So he was a shadow of his former self. And I was like, what have you done, mate? I said, have you had a lap band put on? He said, no, I've been on a water fast for 40 days. And I was like, you can't survive on water for 40 days. He said, oh, mate, I've got this machine. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Anyway, we get back to his place, and sure enough, he's got a Kangen machine there. And that's what got me started in the water industry. So I didn't become a Kangen distributor. I did a lot of research over a long time and ended up selling water ionizers, about 500 water ionizers to people all over Australia, from 2000 and probably 2010 through to 2013. And then, I just kept researching on water, and I didn't think that was the best way to get water that's good for us, electrically ionizing it. We could have a in-depth discussion about ionized water later. But yeah, that's what got me started on the journey.
Wow. So, what do you think the real condition of our drinking water is in towns and cities today, based in Australia?
Yeah, look, I think it's been fairly evident of what we've seen in the last 18 months over the news that the water's less than ideal. We've now got problems with PFAS and PFOS, the fire retardant chemicals, which they spray on our pajamas, our sheets, anything that's got fire retardant on it's pretty much PFAS. They're starting to find that everywhere, not just around airports where they put it in to make the foam. But when they firefight with planes or have gas, they use that stuff. But it's hideous. The water's in a bad state. Like everything, the devil hides in the details. Just because something tastes okay doesn't mean it's healthy. They obviously put a lot of chemical additives in your water now. So whilst a lot of people say, oh, well, it's just tap water, it's fine, couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest.
Do you feel like there is a lot of gaslighting in the sense that we should be lucky we've got access to water, so therefore it's okay?
Okay, so, I think we do take water for granted in Western cultures. When I was living in New York, we had a power outage for 3 days. And so none of the water's been pumped to the roof. Wake up in the morning, you've got no water in your toilet, no water anywhere. All the shops were shut, so you couldn't go into a shop and buy bottled water because there was no electricity. So I think in Western cultures, we do take water for granted. However, the water that we're given is less than ideal.
Okay, beautiful. And that leads us to what you do now, which
Yeah.
is help install water filters into people's homes. So, why should people be looking at getting a water filtration system in their home?
Well, filtering is only one part of the equation. It's a very interesting little industry, the water filtration industry. There's been a lot of new players come to the market in the last few years. A lot of people make promises. It's really easy to make water taste good. It's difficult to make it healthy. It's definitely one part. Filtration is definitely one part of what you want to do to your water, and a lot of different options out there. And there's a lot of cheap rubbish out there in the market, unfortunately. The thing that I find missing in the water industry is there's a lot of people wanting to sell you stuff that have little to no interest in A, the filters being fit for cause, or B, they're sold with a duty of care. Filters for Perth and WA in general need to be a whole lot better than they do for other parts of the country, because our water's at best average. So high-end filtration's the first part, and there's like I said, there's lots of claims made and there's lots of snappy marketing by lots of companies, and the devil hides in the details. So, high infiltration is your first part. The second part to creating great water is restoring the natural movement to the water. So vortexing the water. And in some circles, it's called water structuring, structured water devices. I think that's fundamental to all water systems, whether you just got a little drinking water system under your bench or a whole home system. And the reason I say that is because nowhere in nature does water get move in a straight line. Nature's way of energizing everything's by vortex movement, from your DNA helix to waves to cyclones to the Milky Way. It's all about the spin. And so when you restore that spin motion to water, it creates an energetic field, and that water can do more work. It's just like you. When it's got more energy, it does more work. And water's no different. So restoring that energy is super important. There's a whole lot of things happening inside a vortex. There's temperature gradients, light gradients, inertia gradients, pressure gradients. There's centripetal movement. There's centrifugal movement, so moving outwards, all happening simultaneously inside a vortex. So, and it's just nature's way. There's nothing more fundamental. There's nothing more efficient than nature. So that's the second part to it. Then the third part to it is there's as many ways to enhance water as there is to contaminate water. But there's some fundamentals you can do to it that make the water great. You can run it past tourmaline, far infrared, coral calcium. You can put it past a media that gives it a negative charge. A negative, when I say negative, I'm talking about as an electrical charge, not as an that sort of.
Downside.
So
Yep.
there's some fundamentals you can do to it, which we do in some of our systems. But, if I had to choose one thing out of all that stuff, I'd have a vortex device. If I only had one available, I'm not saying that's optimal, but nature's way is the way forward. We build vortex devices from little guys through to units for pivots and irrigators and parks. We're doing trials on parks at the moment where they're using 20% less water and their turf's better than it's ever been. And that's because of the energy state of the water. All the gardeners out there will know when it rains, your water does much better. Your gardens and grass do much better when it rains than when you water it. And that's for that. The primary reason for that is because the water is in a high energy state that it picks up as it falls through the atmosphere.
So basically, when we're using water, it's kind of like dead, it's lifeless.
Correct. Yep.
Right. So when you talk about the vortex, so I want to talk about me first because I want to get as much out of you as I can for
Yeah.
my family. So we have a rainwater tank. We're not connected to mains.
Yep.
So would you suggest for people who have a rainwater tank, would you put the vortex device inside the rainwater tank to re-liven it?
No, I think you're better off vortexing that water after your filtration. So in your case, you've got a dual housing system there, and then you've got some calcite that you're running the water past to help pull the pH of the water up, which is a good thing. I would put a vortex device after that. So the
Okay.
water.
And how much is usually that for an everyday normal
Well,
house?
like I said, we've got devices from little ones that go under the bench to pivots and irrigator. For a house, the retail on the whole home ones is $2,500. They're expensive.
But worth it.
Like they're expensive. People say to me, "Oh, they're expensive." I'm like, compared to what? The great thing about a vortex generator is it will probably outlast you and I. It's a one-time purchase. There's no moving parts. There's nothing to change. There's nothing to do. Now, if that's not in your budget, then we've got some smaller units that can go on under the bench, into a pre-existing filtration system, and they're like $200 each.
Okay, fantastic. So the everyday person that's going to be listening to this probably doesn't have a rainwater tank,
Yep.
so they would be more inclined to get maybe the smaller one for their home.
I think people underestimate the importance of the water they shower in. It takes 3 days for your skin to recover from a chlorine event. Skin's got a microbiome, just like your guts has got a microbiome. Every time you shower or jump in a chlorine swimming pool, you kill that microbiome. It takes 3 days for it to recover. So maybe some of the skin cancer issues we've got is because we're constantly chlorinating ourselves, killing the microbiome of the skins, so it can't protect us like it's meant to.
Do you think there's a correlation between having chlorine exposure on your skin, and then once you go in the sun, your skin isn't going to be able to protect itself from the sun as much?
Well, I think there's this is probably getting a little bit off water filtration a little bit, but it's probably worth covering off. I think there's a whole combination of why our skin suffers. One, a lot of people wear sunglasses. Your eyes aren't just cameras to outside. They're the ultimate sensor to your environment. That's what sends you to bed at night and wakes you up in the morning is the 24-hour circadian rhythm, light and day, light and dark deal. When we wear sunglasses, we're telling our body there's not as much light, UV light out there as what we expose ourselves to. That's one thing. The other thing too is we're now under a lot of blue light. All the energy efficient bulbs are blue light. Now, blue light is pro growth. And so if you've got misfolded or defective cells on your skin, you put them under blue light, then they're going to grow harder and faster. And the proof's in the pudding. Most people aren't aware that outdoor workers have a lesser incidence of melanoma than indoor workers do. And there's a lesser per capita incidence of skin cancer in Queensland compared to what there is in Tasmania and Victoria. And so light's super important, and obviously this having your skin so it's in a great state. Like when I put whole home systems in, and I talk to, and usually the ladies are the ones that are driving that. I would say 95% of my customers are ladies. The first thing they say to me is, I can't believe how good my skin and my hair is. Right? Because you've taken the contaminants out and then you've energized that water to shower 'em. You just feel good for it. The building blocks of life are light, water, and magnetism, which is another word for grounding. I think you've got to get those fundamentals right, and then you work on the other stuff. Like over my screen at night, one of these things. It blocks out all the blue light, right? Um, and I have that on both my computers. I wear blue blocking glasses. These are daytime blue blocking glasses that cut out 59% of the blue light. Obviously because it's daytime. But getting your light right, to me, is the fundamental deal to getting well or maintaining your health. Water, probably friends, fitness, food's probably 4,
Before
grounding.
we get And grounding, cool. So before we go back to water, let's go to magnetism. So grounding. Can you talk into that?
Our biological design is to be connected to the earth. We sleep up on a bed up off the ground. We walk around in insulated shoes, rubber-soled shoes, most of the day. I'm talking broadly here. Um, and that just disconnects us from a constant flow of electrons. Like the ground's negatively charged. You need electrons coming into the body to so the sun only programs electrons. It doesn't program protons. So it's really not about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. It's really about how many electrons. If you show me somebody that's sick, they usually got a deficit of. They've usually got a deficit of electrons and an abundance of protons. And protonated food would be something like processed food. And you go deep into that, but don't think that's 100% necessary. But grounding. Like I sleep on a grounding mat. You know, I suffer when I don't. My body's just used to being, and to me, that's the easiest way to get electrons into the body. You're lying there for 8 hours. Why not just fill the system up? The caveat I'll have about that is they come so you can plug them into the wall. I wouldn't be doing that. There's a lot of dirty electricity with all the inverters these days. For solar, I run a cord straight out like a little cord straight out through the window and out into the ground. I have a grounding rod outside.
Incredible. So for those listening, coming back to the grounding, so you're, because I understand what you're saying, but for
Yep.
those who are listening that may not understand, that would be taking your shoes off and going and putting your feet on bare grass or sand or earth
Yep.
every day.
Yep.
Because we're not doing that. We're getting out of bed and going straight into shoes. And most people that live in the concrete jungle in the cities, they actually don't touch the earth whatsoever.
Probably the most important thing you can do for your health is see the sun come up every morning, because that sets the circadian rhythms. Right? I get up every morning. I drink about 600 mils of water, the salt in it, and then I'll have a hot water with lemon and cayenne pepper in it, and that sets me up for my hydration for the day. So I'm probably 900 mils of fluid within the first 15 minutes of rising, but I'm outside drinking that stuff. I
Watching the
get outside to
sunrise.
see the sun come up.
Incredible. We've just done an episode. Our first episode that dropped was on circadian rhythm, and it was our most downloaded. It has definitely blown up. And I've had a lot of feedback from parents who are now taking their kids outside for sunrise or after sunset and seeing them being honest, and then turning all blue lights off on their ceilings of their home and seeing their kids sleep better. I've had so many people. I actually was at the park yesterday and another mum
Awesome.
told me that another mum listened to that episode and told her that both of her kids slept through the night after listening to that episode because
Yeah,
she was
cool.
removed blue light from the home, watched the sunrise, sunset, and both kids sleeping through the night. So this is going to be so incredible for parents to listen to because every mum, especially who's going to be listening to this, just wants the best for their kids. So
Of course.
this is just the proof is in the pudding. Everyone's saying it. Everyone in this world that is saying the sunrise is just so powerful and grounding too, which I love that you've mentioned. Let's go back to water filtration now. So how can the everyday person know when they're trying to find somebody to put a water filtration system in their home, how to find the right person? Because they're not all going to be able to contact you, Jodie.
Well, they can, and I'm happy to help them because I'm passionate. I'm passionate about making a difference.
Okay, that's great. All around the world, you'll be flying all around the world,
Yeah,
Jodie.
like
This podcast is
I've
far and wide.
I ship stuff overseas that can be arranged if they've got really snappy marketing. Me that as you and not a lot of information. Then that's probably a red card. And I'm not saying having nice websites and all that sort of stuff's not important. Look, to be honest with you, it's really difficult. I was in the water industry from 2000 and been studying water from 2007. I don't reckon until probably 2017 or 18 I'd worked it all out. I've done 3,000 or 4,000 hours of research. So one of the benefits of chatting to me is that you don't have to spend the time to do it, because I can't tell you how many people have bought systems and bought stuff and it's rubbish.
Well, that's where we're at now with you already. I want to get you out to our property and get you to redo ours. And water should be number one, right?
Yeah, but it's like anything, like you've got a background in. I don't even know what your background's in, Ebony. What's your background in?
I'm a hairdresser from trade,
Okay,
and
so
I would say an
I'm
ex-hairdresser now.
probably not the guy to talk to about hairdressing, but
No.
but there's a whole lot of expertise and knowledge that comes with that you only learn from doing that stuff, right? And there's just too much stuff out there that's it's too hard to learn everything. So you've got to find somebody that's experienced in that area that you can have as your trusted authority, right?
Mm.
If they're just snappy marketers, the other guys that Guys that I find that actually know nothing about water are plumbers. I get that they're in the water business and they can sell filtration stuff. They don't know anything about water or its physics, or they go and buy a setup from PureTech or whoever they get it from, and they install that and they tell you it's the best you can get. And I was like, based on what? But like I said to you, it's a really tough subject. You think it's simple, but and look, I'm not a water expert by any stretch of the imagination, but what I do know, because I don't think there's any water experts on the planet, because we haven't discovered all water's secrets yet. I do know can help a lot of people. That's the way I like to frame it up.
Okay. I've got my water bottle here in front of you. What's your thoughts on how we're consuming water? And I've thought it's the best thing to fill up my Yeti, my stainless steel water bottle every day. I'll drink about 2 of these. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I drink out of a glass bottle, which most people aren't willing to go through the risk of having. Let's just put it as the risk of having a glass bottle. But I don't drink out of a stainless steel bottle, and the reason I don't drink out of stainless steel bottles, nowhere in nature does water sit by metals. It goes past metals in the ground, but it's not a concept. There's not a concentrated metal. And also, metals are an antenna for the environment. If you're in a city where you've got a lot of 5G and 4G, that vessel being an antenna for that, like earrings,
Wow.
it's like earrings, nose rings, and all those other things. And in the environment we live in today, they're all antennas.
Wow, you've made me think about stainless steel and all my piercings a lot differently.
Yeah, well, it's
Okay, all
but
right. So
you can only do better when you know better, and this is not about making things right or wrong. This is about you being informed and being able to choose for yourself. It's like people say, well, should I do this or should I do that? It's like, you do what's best for you. You do you. It's not my job to do you. I'm busy enough doing myself.
100%. I really respect that. Okay, so for water bottles, your best recommendation would be glass if
Yep.
possible. So most of my community are mums. What would you say would be best for little toddlers?
I would probably go a trite, because toddlers, I would probably go Triton plastic. There's a brand of, there's a certain type of plastic called Triton that a lot of drink bottles are made out of these days, are not so hard to find. Um, I would go that, or a little glass bottle.
That glass bottle has like a silicon kind of
Silicon wrap around it. Yeah.
wrap around it. Yep. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to Kangen water and ionizing water. Let's go through all of that
All right.
because I think there's a lot of confusion about again what's good and what's bad and hydra. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly.
Hydrogen
Hydronize?
water.
Yes. Yep. Can we touch on that, please?
I can. Like I said to you earlier, I sold about 500 of them, so I've got an idea. So ionize just means to gain or lose an electron, right? Or electrons. Ionizing water can happen in several ways. One, it can happen through motion. So in our vortex generators, we're ionizing the water. Two, you can do it via an electric Kangen machine or an equivalent of a Kangen machine. There's lots of different ionizers out there. And then thirdly, you can ionize minerally. Now, I'm super grateful to the Kangen community for one reason, and one reason only. They bring awareness to water about how important it is. Yes, most of them know not too much about water, and that this is not a slight on them. If they're open to having a discussion, then that's great. However, there's a lot of Kangen representatives that are, when they've got a $6,700 investment in something, they've got an unconscious bias. What they've been told by their upline, or what they've learned about pH and water, about ionization, etc., etc. So obviously the surface tension's reduced, which is good. The pH is probably the least most important part of water. People don't understand that there's a difference between alkalinity and pH. They're assimilated, But alkalinity is a liquid's ability to buffer acidity. pH is just an algorithm of hydrogen potential. So something can have a high pH but low alkalinity. So in Melbourne, the water out of the tap has got a pH of 8.5, but it only has 30 parts per million of total dissolved solids. Whereas in Perth, there's 550 million parts of total dissolved solids, or TDS. What that means is more alkalinity in the water in Perth than there is in Melbourne. So you can have a high pH, but low alkalinity. And a lot of people put those together. So, but I don't think the pH is that super important when it comes down to the water you're drinking. I think there's a nice point of differentiation that marketers like to make, like Kangen people, like a lot of the alkaline water guys make, which to me is nebulous. I don't think it's that important. I think what's more important is the energy state of the water. Now, an ionizer does energize the water. Yes, it does. But a Kangen machine uses a charge to do that and splits the water into two streams, anode and a cathode. The problem you've got with this, and there was a guy who was IBM's chief crystallographer. He's basically the guy that came up with chips, Marcel Vogel. And Marcel Vogel warned against electrical ionization of water because it destroys the structural integrity of the water. In fact, there's a book there's a couple of books that I'd recommend too, which I can either do now or later in the interview, that are fundamentally great books to learn a little bit of science without going too deep on science. One's called Dancing with Water by MJ Pengman, and then there's another one by Dr. Carly Newday called The Water Codes. Now, in that Water Codes book, Carly talks about Marcel Vogel and what he said about electric ionization destroying the structural integrity of the water.
Wow. So to break it down, because I feel like even for me, you've gone way above my my
Research grade.
yeah. So let's go back down a little bit.
Yep.
So back to the Kangen machine. So I'm actually not aware. I tried to look into it a little while ago, but so bring me back. So they say that is a higher pH is better for you.
Put it this way, you can't increase your pH by drinking high pH water. It just doesn't happen. The amount of acidity that's caused through metabolism, carbohydrate production, you can't do it. You need the minerals from food to elevate your pH, right? There's not enough minerals in the water to alter your pH. You can drink high pH water any old time, but drinking high pH water, that's, again, that the high pH is because of the amount of electricity that's being put over those plates. So that's how they can alter the amount of pH, by the amount of electricity they put across the plates. But I don't think that's the be-all and end-all. What makes ionizers so great, especially when you first get them, they create molecular hydrogen in the water. And molecular hydrogen is what your body uses to make energy. So you've got all these little organelles called mitochondria that make energy. They use hydrogen to do that. They don't use fat, they don't use proteins. You break the hydrogen out of food and you separate water in your eyes and skin and throughout the body to create that energy. So the molecular hydrogen's epic. However, the downside, and when you get the machine and you start drinking that water, you feel top dog, right? You feel amazing. But that doesn't last forever. And that usually happens for one reason, is because those plates get covered in calcium. And once those plates are covered in calcium, it doesn't create as much molecular hydrogen. Now, you can put a cleaning solution over the, Kangen do a cleaning solution over the plates. And I think they tell you need to do it, I can't even remember. I think it's once a week or once a month. Or I don't think I've met anybody that does it religiously every week like they should. And I don't even think that's enough. I think you probably needed to do it every 3 days. So if you don't do it, or if you're just doing it once a month, and you're in really hard water like you've got in Perth, yes, it'll raise the pH. Yes, it'll drop the ORP and give the water a negative charge. Yes, it will drop the surface tension, but it won't create the amount of a therapeutic dose of molecular hydrogen. That's the thing that makes you feel good.
Right. So would you say to people that it's still a better investment and still a good choice?
Ionisation-wise, I'm not here to bag Kangan out. Ionisation-wise, because I've had one of those machines pulled apart and tested by an electrical engineer as to the quality of the build and all that stuff. I think they're a very well-built machine. I think their filtration and their pre-filtration offerings average at best. They're great ionisers if that's what you want. It's not for me to tell you what's right for you, right? All I can tell you is what my experience is. I've sold 500 water ionisers. I don't drink electrically ionised water.
Okay, so what about the Brita water jugs that you can get from Coles, Woolies, if anyone's just wanting to start?
Now you're getting back to introductory. If you want to make your
Yep.
water taste better, happy times, right? You still haven't changed the energy state of that water. Yes, you're taking the chlorine out of the water. I haven't seen if they're using. I think I've said it earlier, the devil hides in the details. So these days, most of the municipalities around Australia, except for I think Tasmania, use something called chloramine. And chloramine's when they take chlorine and they gas it with ammonia gas. Now, regular carbon filters will take the chlorine component out, but leave the ammonia in the water. The ammonia is tasteless and odorless. So you can't tell it's in there, right? Does that mean the water's because you can't taste the chlorine, but the ammonia's in the water? Is that water now healthy? I would say not. It doesn't address fluoride. Now, you can believe what you like about fluoride. At the end of the day, it arrives from industrial production of fertilizer in trucks that have hazmat signs all over them. It's super dangerous for the plant users to use, like the hazmat gear that they wear. It's dangerous. Like you get that stuff on your hands in raw form or on your skin in raw form, it'll kill you. But they put it in the water supply at 0.8 parts per million. Fluoride's a dielectric blocker. What that means in simple terms is it stops your cells making and holding energy. Yes, it might be good for your teeth, but it doesn't just go to your teeth. It goes everywhere. I'm not a fan. There's over 65 clinical studies out there that shows that it lowers the IQ of kids. I don't want that for my children. The system we live in is not geared towards you doing great. That's why these conversations are important. And fluoride's hard to get out of water. Don't get me wrong.
Just touching on fluoride, what are your thoughts about buying toothpaste containing fluoride?
We don't do it at this address.
And why not?
Electric blocker. You scrub your
Your
teeth
mouth
with it, but
absorbs.
it goes in through your mouth. And I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I used to climb on my high horse and tell people what to do. All I can do is give you the awarenesses and let you make the choices about what's best for you and your family. At the end of the day, there's some irrefutable laws. They're called the laws of nature, right? And they're laws for a reason. And the piper gets paid. Much of the way we live today with things like fluoride, whatever those things are, they're not what we're designed for.
All right. What about chlorine? We touched on chlorine just slightly, but I think chlorine's a really important one to talk
Yeah,
about
well,
because so many of
from
us.
drinking chlorinated waters going to do the same as putting on your skin. It's going to kill your microbiome. I don't think that's a good deal for anybody. The reason they put chlorine in the water is to kill the biology and any potential biology in the water that might make you sick. They've got to deliver potable water to your house. Just because it's drinkable doesn't mean it's healthy. No, our environment's never been more toxic, whether it's from the electromagnetic frequencies we live in, artificial light, chemicals on food, in food. The list is long. For me, it's about trying to balance back get more in tune with nature, sync with nature.
So, for parents doing swimming lessons, do you have any suggestions on how they can better protect their kids from going in chlorine swimming pools?
We limit the amount of chlorinated water. like I've got a 9-year-old boy. Here in Bunbury, there's swimming lessons available in summer down at Cabana Bay and the beach. I'm sure there'd be something similar in Perth and Mandurah up that coast. I would highly recommend that you teach your kids to swim in that, and if you can get them to that as opposed to chlorinated pools, that's great. It's the balancing act. I just wouldn't let them be jumping in it every day. You also can't be the killer of all joy. I think it's pretty important that kids learn to swim too. But it's definitely where you can mitigate it, mitigate it.
I grew up at a friend's place, swimming all the time, and I would remember getting out the pool and my eyes would be red and everything would be blurry for a few hours. Do you know what's actually happening there? Now you've got me intrigued.
I could guess that you probably chewed up a bit of oxygen out of the eyes.
Would that have long-term effects on your eyesight?
I think more the devices and the lights we live under have more of an effect on your eyes. But look, you can't take anything off the table.
And what about saltwater pools? Because
Yeah, I
we have
love
a saltwater
saltwater
swimming
pools.
pool.
Happy times. There's other ways to disinfect water too. You can use ozone. You can put through a nano bubble generator that's infuse it with CO2. Like there's lots of different things. But if you've got a swimming pool, saltwater swimming pool is probably the way forward.
Have you heard much about the magnesium swimming pools?
Yeah, they're awesome. They're mineral swimming pools. Happy times. As long as you're not chemicalizing yourself. I think magnesium swimming pools are epic.
Okay, incredible. I've heard a few people investing in them, and I have
Yeah.
wondered. Okay, so how can people find out what's happening in their local water?
So all the water authorities test. They'll do it like whether it's Aquest or Watercorp here in Western Australia. They'll 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 do parameters where they're testing for alkalinity, contaminants, lead, arsenic, all that, all the nasties. And they publish those. You'll find those online. Just put your town in and water report, and they'll come up with something. Sometimes it takes a bit of digging, but you'll definitely be able to find them.
So for the everyday Joe Blow, what are we looking for in the water to understand it better when you're looking at those reports?
Well, you put it this way: that if you want to address the fluoride, it's going to be in there in most major metropolitan areas. Perth, over here on the west coast, Perth, Bunbury's just got it. Lucky us. Geraldine, where there's a decent population of people, because it's expensive infrastructure to put in. So, like in Margaret River, where there's not enough people, no fluoride. Dunsborough and Busselton, they may get it down the track, but at this point in time, no fluoride.
Do they
What's that?
add calcium into water?
Not so much here in the west. The other thing too is that there's a lot of water that into metropolitan areas now that's from desalination. So they remineralize that water. So they take salt water and they strip all the salt out of it.
And what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's okay. It's obviously not natural.
You did touch on PFAS, which I've actually just started to really dive into about basically so that for people who are listening who don't know what that is, it's a forever chemical, so found in Teflon, but and other things. But one of the things I'm really starting to get into now is fabrics about what we're wearing on our skin. So those forever chemicals that are a lot of found in activewear, we're sweating and then it's
Yeah.
we're absorbing it into our skin. And so it's actually in our water too.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So you can run, but you can't hide. So it's about just, like you said, just listening to all of these and learning and just doing the best you can with the funds as well that you have at the time. Because I know for me, I become aware and then I look around and it's you want to do all the things, but you in the reality is we can't do it all at that time. So I guess it's just picking and choosing
I
what we
I
can.
just encourage people to get the fundamentals right, get the light right, get your light diet right, get your water right as much as you can afford to. People say, "Oh, that's expensive." I'm like, compared to what? You drop 50 grand on a car without thinking about it, but spending 5 grand on the best water filtration system you can find, you're like, nah, it's too expensive. I'm like, you got your priorities messed up, people.
That's exactly right. Priorities. We've touched on alkaline water.
Yep.
We've touched on hydrogenated water.
Up until November 2023, you could sell hydrogen tablets in Australia. I used to bring them in and sell them. They're epic. How they work is they have elemental magnesium in them, and the oxygen in the water is drawn to the magnesium. To bond with the magnesium, it needs to cast off a hydrogen. So you get all this hydrogen floating in the water. Hydrogen's a selective antioxidant. It only takes out oxygen-free radicals. It doesn't take out other free radicals that the body needs for cell signaling and things like that. Not all free radicals are enemies. It's also raw energy for your cells. So that's what your mitochondria use to make ATP, which is the energy currency of the body. They use hydrogen to make that so. I've still got probably 50 or 100 bottles of that stuff left. My 93-year-old grandmother, who lives in Bridgetown, she goes bonkers when she runs out. I told you to bring me some more of that stuff. Now, she's 93. She's living at a nursing home. He hasn't been sick once through COVID. Usually elderly people are the ones that get crook. And she's like, and she got onto them after a flu. And she said, I've just felt down for weeks and weeks. I said, well, start taking these. Oh, okay, I'll give it a go. And then at the other end of the extreme, I've worked with pro athletes. I've worked with AFL teams, well, not whole teams of guys, but lots of guys in the AFL, captains, regular season players, All Blacks, Wallabies, jockeys, race car drivers. The recovery rate and your endurance when you're taking molecular hydrogen is off the charts. I'm not much of a big physical exercise guy, but a couple of times a year I'll grab the axe and go and cut some wood for the father-in-law and mother-in-law, and it will be a day of throwing the axe. Now, you do that from not doing much exercise. You should be incapacitated for the following days with sore muscles. I drop two hydrogen tablets before I start, 2 halfway through and 2 at the end. I wake up the next morning and go, we can do that again today. Molecular hydrogen.
Okay,
Yep.
and you have them so people can purchase.
I used to sell them. You can't buy them in Australia anymore. The TGA knocked them on the head. However, there is a workaround. You're allowed to bring whatever supplements you like into Australia for personal use. Not whatever supplements, but pretty much anything that's legal you can bring in for personal use. The problem we have in Australia is that it costs about 50 grand to approve a new supplement ingredient. However, when it's approved, when you pay the 50 grand, it's not just approved for you, it's approved for everybody. So what you'll find is in Australia, all the supplements are subpar to what they should be because nobody wants to pay the money. You look at a multivitamin, there's a company out in New Zealand called XTND Life. They have epic supplements, and it's because they're not as tightly regulated, because they can use new products without having to go through the TGA registration. So supplements in Australia are outdated and subpar, to be honest with you.
Is there anything similar to that?
If you jump online, you can buy that stuff from iHerb, or McCullough makes a good tablet. There's a few different brands of tablets out there, but the McCullough one's probably the way forward.
Okay, beautiful. And so can you repeat again what I'd be putting in to look for it?
H2, search H2 online,
Okay,
H2
fantastic.
tablets.
I'm just thinking because my partner, he's always out on our property from dawn till dusk and working extremely hard, so that he'll benefit a lot from that.
He does a couple of tablets in the morning and a couple of tablets at night. He'll be chalk and cheese different.
Okay, fantastic. Is there any other things that you feel like people that are listening could benefit a lot about understanding water?
There's the stuff that we haven't touched on, that like I said to you before we jumped on this call, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about water. However, if you've got somebody that's sick, there's something called deuterium depleted water. Now, deuterium's a hydrogen isotope. So hydrogen has a proton in the middle and an electron flying around the outside. Deuterium has a proton and a neutron in the middle. So it has double the molecular size. And it's about 1 in 6,500 hydrogen molecules is this thing called deuterium. The only way you've probably heard deuterium is in deuterium bombs, the H bombs. They split the hydrogen atoms, those deuterium atoms, because the single ones are harder to think. Deuterium's not bad, except when it gets in the wrong places. So all of our cells are like us. They need to get to a certain size before they replicate. They use deuterium to do that. For ladies with multiple sclerosis, when they're pregnant, their MS symptoms go away. And that's because the fetus is onboarding all the deuterium. And then when the baby comes out, their symptoms come back because that deuterium's not being sucked away.
Does the baby then inherit that?
No. Deuterium depletion if you've got cancer, and deuterium depleted water, all the water in Australia, seawater has a deuterium level of about 155 parts per million. Our biological design's probably to be around about 120 parts per million. All the water in Australia, I've tested 55 sites around Australia for deuterium depletion, and the best was Jenolan Caves at 147. Most of it was up even higher. Some of it was even higher than seawater, like 155 parts per million, 160. I think the highest we got was 161 parts per million. Now, what determines the amount of deuterium in water is the altitude you're at, the latitude. So as you get closer to the poles, there's less deuterium in the water, and the geology that it runs past. So the minerals in the water. Now, obviously here in Australia, we're pretty flat. We're up towards the tropics at the top parts. So the deuterium levels in the water here are fairly high, and we're an old continent. There's a book called The Curing Cancer, The Beneficial Effects of Depleting Deuterium by Sommelier.
Depleting cancer. Beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
That if you've got somebody that's sick with cancer, that's worth having. Yeah. Deuterium depleted water is expensive. Right? It's probably $8 to $10 for a 500 ml bottle. There's some research that you need to do on it, but at the end of the day, if you've got cancer, then I would highly recommend that you look at moving to a deuterium depleted diet and drinking deuterium depleted water. Because really, at the end of the day, if you spend 10 grand on water, so what if you get to live? If you've got the cash available, do it.
Yeah, incredible. I'm just trying to circle around because I really want our listeners from every stage that they're in their life to be able to get the most from this conversation. So now let's go to a family who are renting.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your biggest recommendation to filtrating their water to ensure that their babies are bathing in water? And can we go into why is it important to filter the water that your kids are swimming in the bath, not just for the chlorine aspect, because I think that's the only thing we touched on.
Yeah, look, I think the chlorine's the main thing. Their skin's so sensitive. I think that's probably disabling that chlorine's probably the most important thing. I do a shower filter setup with a vortex device on it. That works pretty well. To take care of that. So, you could bath those kids in with a handheld device. If you're a renter, and you can't put holes in the bench and all that other good stuff, I've got some underbench units that plumb straight into the cold water line that you can just take to the next place.
Fantastic. So I'm just trying to think, my best friend, she's going to listen to this. And when I go stay at her house and you run the bath for the kids to get in together, the bathroom stinks of chlorine. And same when I go visit my friends in Darwin, you turn on the water, and when you haven't been around showers or baths, in quite some time that have chlorine in them, it makes you feel like you smell like you're swimming in a swimming pool. But I think for people who live in it, you'd actually lose kind of the senses to it. You
Yeah.
can't smell it.
The one thing's guaranteed to happen, I will turn you into a water snob.
Awesome. We're like water snobs. Okay, beautiful. So you've also studied quantum biology. So is that the touching of the sun and the grounding?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
just intensely curious about how stuff works. It doesn't matter whether it's from water, health, finance, whatever. I got to know how stuff works and how it's controlled and what the mechanisms are. What got me into that was I'd tried every diet known to man. I'd been vegan, 2.5 years a vegetarian, raw foodist, paleo, carnivore, pretty much you name it. I've had a crack at it, right? But there was nothing that sat right. And it wasn't until I learned the quantum biology stuff around your environment goes the food that you should be eating because that's the environment, the light environment of the time. So if it doesn't grow where you live, then you probably shouldn't eat it. Like down south, down here now, we what 50 days off the shortest day. UV light is what puts sugar into food, into fruit. So when there's no UV light or you're at the bottom of a UV light cycle, none of the plants that are high UV, there's no watermelons, there's no apples, there's no plums, there's no anything, right? But they're in shutdown. It's high UV. That's why all the bananas and all the melons and all that stuff come from up north. Now, the other thing that those foods do is they create a lot of deuterium, right? Which is that hydrogen isotope. So they're little deuterium bombs. When you start relating everything back to light and water and grounding, you're like, that makes sense. So it's not so much about
The diet.
the diet. Like, I've 2 months, sort of 2 months either side of the shortest day, I don't eat sugar. I'll eat a little bit of fruit, but I won't eat any processed sugars because you couldn't go somewhere and get sugar-rich foods down here at this time of year.
Okay, so to make sure I'm on the same, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yep.
So when we're in winter,
Yep.
when the days are shorter,
Yep.
the UV isn't as strong.
Yep.
Sugar foods we should stay away from.
Correct.
Okay, I'm with you.
This is a time to be more keto. A couple of months either side of June 21, go keto.
Which is,
Just not eating sugars.
and will that change? So in summer, will you then incorporate any breads or pastas?
Yeah, there's more. It's UV light that burns, that helps push deuterium out of your body. So when you're getting more UV light in summer, have the food with the higher deuterium foods in it, the sugars or the carbohydrates. Did a little YouTube video series where I tried to take the very complex learnings that I took from this neurosurgeon and I tried to make them more consumable. I'll give you that link and you can just put it there. It's free for people to use. Me trying to explain the shitty environment we live in. And,
Is there anything else?
how to mitigate it. No, the other thing that I would suggest that everybody has, you can't manage what you don't measure. The electromagnetic frequencies from these things, Wi-Fi, like at home we don't have Wi-Fi, everything's cabled. Sleeping next to sockets and a little meter that can measure the electromagnetic frequencies and radio frequencies that you're subjected to can make a big difference. And you can get one of those for less than $300. I think everybody should have one of those.
Yeah, I have a discount code for one actually. Actually, the sponsor of this show is Radius Smart, and they also have cotton blankets that have silver entwined into the cotton,
Yeah, for
which
grounding.
yep. So I actually have a discount code, and they have EMF readers. I actually haven't got one yet, but I have one. Because
I'd
that'd
be
be really
interested to have a look at those.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll
Yeah,
have to
because
jump on.
there's Mitometer is the company that I've, and they're like $299 and they're epic. One other thing I'd encourage you people that are watching is just be open. Just be open to stuff might not fit into your paradigm, but just be open to different stuff. because unless you're open, you're not going to change.
Yeah, Jodie, my reason that I'm on this journey is fertility. I have numerous friends who are having issues conceiving, and my drive is to ensure that I raise kids that don't have issues, because I don't want to hold them grieving the loss of not being able to reproduce, because it's everybody's biggest right. And I think if we're not looking into everything and questioning all the convenience that are linking to killing your sperm count, killing off eggs, I think we really need to do this for our next generation. This is my why.
I think that's super important, but I don't think we're really going to see the long-term effects for quite some time, because as you well know, you might not have thought about this, but you've got all the eggs that you've got. Those eggs were inside your mum, right? So it really comes back to your grandmother. My wife was inside my grandmother, her grandmother, who's 93, via her mum, right? So I don't think we're going to see the long-term effects of all this nastiness for decades down the track. And I don't think they'll put all those bits together. I don't think the system's designed. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you like, but it's not really about health.
If anyone's listening to this podcast, they are questioning the system. There's no doubt about it. So hopefully that can be everyone's driving force to ensuring that it's not just our kids, then it's our grandkids and our future. Like, we're healing a sick culture, which I've taken that term off another podcast I listened to, but we really are. I think a lot of people are wanting to do better, and yeah, you've done an amazing job at helping guide a lot of people, because water is such a fundamental part of health and well-being. So, Jodie, thank you so much for coming on. How can people find you?
So I've got a couple of websites. My water filtration site is easywatersolutions.com.au. And then the vortex stuff that I was talking about is President Water, as in Donald, presidentwater.com. .co, sorry. I've got the .com sitting there. I just haven't fired it up yet. .co. So
Fantastic.
presidentwater.co. And look, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to share what I've got, and we're all in this together. None of us get out of it alive, so just make it as good as you can.
Thanks, Jodie.